Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I am your host today, Nada, and we are discussing a remarkable success story that proves Africa is not just participating in the global cleaning energy, it is leading in some areas. Our topic is largest geothermal power producer in Africa. Uh, we have also in the podcast our guest Deborah,
Hello, it's a pleasure being here.
and also we have Joshua.
Hi, I'm glad being here. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, so we are gonna start with basics. Uh, Deborah, many of our listeners may have heard the term geothermal energy, but they may not fully understand what it means. Could you break it down for us?
Absolutely. I think the easiest way to understand geothermal energy is to think of it as using the Earth's own heat as a source of power. Now, the word geothermal actually comes from two Greek words. The first is geo, meaning earth, and then therm, meaning heat. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, there is an enormous amount of heat. Now, in areas where geological activities bring that heat relatively close to the surface, underground water can become extremely hot and turn into steam. Now, what engineers essentially do is to tap into these natural recurring reservoirs. They drill deep wells into the ground, bring the hot water or steam to the surface, and use that steam to drive turbines connected to electricity generators. And what makes this particularly interesting from an energy perspective is its reliability. Now, with solar power, you are naturally limited to sunlight. With wind, you are dependent on wind conditions. But geothermal is different because the heat beneath the earth doesn't simply disappear when the sun goes down or when the weather changes. So, geothermal plants can provide electricity continuously. They
That is fascinating, Deborah, because many people often think renewable energy is only available when the weather cooperates. So, geothermal energy provides what experts call baseload power, a continuous and dependable source of electricity. Is it right, Deborah?
happens when the wind isn't blowing. Now, geothermal gives us another option. It can provide what we call base load or firm power, meaning it can contribute a steady supply of electricity to the grid. So it's not necessarily about choosing geothermal instead of solar or wind. Now, in many cases, the real opportunity is to have these different renewable sources complement one another. And that's part of what makes Kenya's story so interesting.
Great. Uh, Joshua, before we focus specifically on Kenya, could you briefly tell us where geothermal electricity generation actually began?
Yes, certainly, Nadia. Kenyans are not the first set of people to discover geothermal electricity. The first successful geothermal electricity happened in Ladello, Italy, in the year 1904, when the then Italian inventor Prince Piero Gennaro Conti generated electricity using geothermal steam. Then, after several years, in 1960, the United States commissioned the Geysers geothermal power plant in California, which became one of the world's largest geothermal developments. Now, this pioneering project has provided the technology and experience that countries like Kenya will later build upon, yeah, for a successful geothermal electricity generation.
Great. So while Kenya wasn't the first country to harness geothermal energy, it has certainly become one of the world's greatest success stories.
Exactly. Kenya has taken those early innovations and has adapted them exceptionally well to his own.
Okay. Uh, Deborah, what makes Kenya particularly suitable for geothermal power generation?
Now, say the biggest advantage Kenya has is geology. You see, Kenya sits along the Great Rift Valley, which is one of the world's largest, most geological active regions. Now, the movement of tectonic plates in this area creates conditions where heat from deep within the earth is relatively close to the surface. And that heat doesn't just sit there, it interacts with underground water, creating reservoirs of extremely hot water and steam. So, in a sense, Kenya has been given a natural advantage, but having the resource is only the beginning. You can have enormous geothermal potential underground, but if you don't have the technology, the expertise, investment, infrastructure, and political commitment to develop it, that potential remains just what it is, the potential.
That's great, Deborah. So when did Kenya begin exploring these resources?
Um, Kenya's geothermal exploration dates back to 1952, when investigations into the country's geothermal potential began with the East African Power and Lighting Company, with support from the United Nations Development Programme. Then, in 1956, exploratory wells were drilled at Olkaria. Interestingly, these early attempts weren't an immediate success. Temperatures reached approximately 235 degrees Celsius, but wells didn't produce enough steam for commercial electricity generation. And I actually think that's one of the most important parts of Kenya's story. Because when we look at Kenya today, it's easy to see the hundreds of megawatts of geothermal capacity and assume that success happened quickly. But it didn't. There were unsuccessful attempts, technical difficulties, significant cost, and a lot of uncertainty. But Kenya continued exploring, researching, and investing. Eventually, that persistence created the foundation for what we see today.
That's so great. So, Joshua, when did Kenya finally achieve commercial success? Joshua?
Okay, let
Joshua?
me Okay, I think let me take that for Joshua. Um, Kenya's finally achieved commercial success in June 1981 when Okaria 1 commissioned its first 15 megawatt generating units. And I think it's significant because in 1981, it marked the point where Kenya's geothermal ambitions became a commercial reality. Now, the first 15 megawatt unit at Okaria 1 became Africa's first commercial geothermal power plant, and that was a major step, not just for Kenya, but for the continent. Now, two additional 15 megawatt units followed in 1982 and 1985, taking up area 1 to 45 megawatts. But what's important is that Kenya didn't stop there. The first plant essentially demonstrated that geothermal could work commercially in the country. Once that confidence was established, then Kenya could build on it. So that's where we begin to see the development of Okeria 2, Okeria 3, Okeria 4, and 5, alongside other geothermal projects.
Okay, that's so great. Uh,
All right, I'm back now. Can you guys hear me now?
yes,
Can you guys
Joshua,
hear
you
me
can,
now?
yeah,
All right.
I can hear you. Uh, and question for you,
Thank you, Deborah. Yeah.
can you tell us more about what is our, why are we beginning type or area 1, 2, 3, and 5? Can you tell us more about it?
Yes. After the development of Okara 1, then the Kenya Electricity Generating Company, which is known as KenGen, yeah, they worked alongside other independent power producers and international partners, such as the World Bank and the Japan International Cooperation Agency. Yeah, so this long-term partnership was what transformed Kenya's geothermal energy from just an experimental idea into one of Kenya's most important energy sources. And that's why the development of Okaria 2, Okaria 3, Okaria 4, and 5 was rapid as a result of this partnership, yes, with other power producers.
Okay, great. Deborah, can you please tell us where does Kenya stand today in geothermal power production?
Okay, today, Kenya stands as Africa's largest geothermal power producer, with installed geothermal capacity reported approximately 940 megawatts. And when you look at where the country started, this is quite remarkable. But I think the most important question isn't simply how many megawatts does Kenya generate. It's actually what difference has all that generation made. Now, geothermal power has helped Kenya to diversify its electricity supply, reduce dependence on imported fossil fuels, and strengthen its energy security. There is also an important connection with hydropower. Kenya has historically relied significantly on hydropower, but drought can reduce water levels and therefore reduce hydropower generation. Now, geothermal provides an important alternative because its availability isn't dependent on rainfall in the same way. So, when hydropower is under pressure, geothermal can help provide stability to electricity system. And there's also the environmental side because geothermal is a relatively low carbon source of electricity. Expanding it can help Kenya increase electricity supply while keeping emissions lower than they would be with greater dependence on fossil fuel generation.
Wow, that is an impressive transformation, Deborah. From unsuccessful drilling attempts in the 1950s to becoming Africa's leader today.
It really is. And for me, the most inspiring part is the timeline. Now we are talking about a journey that began exploration in the 1950s, experienced setbacks, reached its major first commercial milestone in 1981, and has continued expanding for decades. That tells us something important about energy development. You don't always see the results of an energy investment immediately. Sometimes the work is being done today, that is the research, the exploration, the infrastructure, and the training. And all this work might only produce its biggest impacts years later. Kenya's geothermal story is therefore also a story about long-term thinking.
Yeah, impressive. Joshua, beyond electricity generation, what impact has geothermal energy had on Kenya's economy?
Yes, Nadia, the impact has been great. Yeah, you can imagine a nation where its citizens have access to 24/7 electricity supply, power supply. Yes, definitely, business will thrive better because reliable electricity attracts industries, encourage investments. Yeah, because businesses are going to be cutting costs on power, right? So they are going to produce more, and there will also be more employment opportunities, yeah, in a country or in a nation like that, because as businesses thrives better, they will need more workers, and of course they will need to pay these workers. Yeah, so there's a lot of advantage that and benefits that the geothermal energy had on the Kenya's economy. And let's examine the a very suitable example, which is the Okaria Green Energy Park, where industries are powered by clean geothermal electricity. This simply means that businesses will be able to produce their goods while reducing carbon emissions, unlike those that use uh, other source of power, which makes Kenya to be more attractive for sustainable manufacturing.
Yeah, that's so great, Joshua. Can you, Vibora, tell us what lessons can other African countries learn from Kenya's geothermal success?
Thank you, Nada. Lessons other African countries can learn. There are several. Natural resources alone don't create development. Kenya had the geological advantage, right? But that advantage has to be supported by research, skilled professionals, investment, infrastructure, policy, and international cooperation. So, natural resources alone does not create development. And the second lesson is patience. Now, Kenya began exploring geothermal resources in the early 1950s, but commercial success didn't come overnight. So, when countries invest in renewable energy, they have to be prepared to think beyond immediate results. There's also another lesson I find particularly interesting. Now, knowledge itself can become a resource. Kenya didn't just develop geothermal power plants. Over time, it developed engineers, scientists, and technical expertise around geothermal energy. That expertise can then be shared with other countries facing similar challenges. So Kenya's achievement isn't only that it generates geothermal electricity, it has also demonstrated that African countries can develop specialized technical knowledge and become contributors to the continent's wider energy transition. And I think that's the bigger message here. Now, Kenya's story shows that Africa doesn't necessarily have to wait for solutions to be imported from elsewhere. With the right investments, research, and collaboration, African countries can develop solutions around the resources and circumstances they already have.
That's really right, Vibora. And one more that describe Kenya's geothermal data. What can you say?
Um, I'll say the one word that
What
describes
was
Kenya.
geothermal
Okay, the one word that I will use to describe Kenya's geothermal journey is persistence. Because if you look at the journey from early exploration through unsuccessful wells to becoming Africa's largest geothermal producer, you realize that the breakthrough wasn't the result of one decision. It was the result of continuing after the first attempt didn't work. So I would say persistent.
That's right. So what about you, Joshua?
Okay. I would
How,
say
how do you
vision.
Kenya's journey by one word?
All right, Nadia. I would say vision. Yes, vision. Kenya has this one vision of powering the whole nation with uh, geothermal have the geological advantage. And just like my colleague said, that it is not their success today is not as a result of one attempt, right? So when they started, there were unsuccessful attempts, but then they keep going on because they have a common goal, even though political interest differs, right? Government changes and some interest might have differed, but then they know that uh, they can achieve a 24-hour supply through geothermal energy because of their geological advantage, and that has kept them going. Yeah, so I would say vision.
Yeah, great. Great work, Joshua. So now, one lesson every African policy should make. What would you say, Deborah?
Okay, the one lesson that every African policymaker should remember, for me, I would say, is to invest in the long run, like invest in the long term. Because renewable energy infrastructure isn't something you build today and forget about tomorrow. You have to invest in research, people, technology, and infrastructure consistently. Because sometimes the biggest returns on those investments won't be visible immediately, but they can shape a country's energy future for decades. And I think Kenya's geothermal story gives us a useful perspective on Africa's renewable energy future. The continent has enormous renewable resources, but the real challenge is turning those resources into reliable, affordable, and sustainable development. Now, Kenya shows that that is possible. So the question is now how other African countries can identify the resources available to them, invest in the right technologies, and build the expertise needed to turn those resources into opportunities. And maybe perhaps that is where the next chapter of African's clean energy story begins.
Great, I agree with you, Deborah. Uh, what do you say, Joshua?
Yeah, thank you, Nada. I believe every African leader should also emulate this from Kenya. Yeah, every African leader, just like Kenya, should think beyond short-term political cycles or personal interests, right? So they should also learn to invest for future generations, just like Kenya did. So Kenya was not just focused on what is obtainable now for uh, for those that are maybe occupying the political seats or the current political leaders, but they also have a vision for the future generation. They know that someday, because of the country's geological advantage, if enough resources is invested in that, the countries can run 24/7, right, on geothermal electricity generation. So I believe every African leader should emulate this from Kenya, and they should also invest continuously for future generations.
Yeah, not an inside discussion today's. Today's conversation reminds us that renewable energy is not simply about generating electricity. It is about creating jobs, protecting the environment, strengthening it, and ensuring long-term energy security. Kenya's remarkable journey from explorating during 1950s to becoming Africa's largest geothermal power producer shows what can happen when government commitment, scientific innovation, international collaboration, and strategic investment come together. I thank you, Deborah and Joshua, for sharing your valuable insights with us today, and also to our listener.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for tuning in. Uh, if you enjoyed this podcast, please uh, follow us to see our upcoming podcast. And thank you so much. Goodbye.